All right, welcome to the Zach on Earth podcast, the show where we bring you news from the human world and beyond. I'm your host, Zach, and welcome back. Let's dive right in. So this week we have a few stories that cover the gambit from animals, plants, and the environment to space and tech. So I'm really excited to get into this week's stories, and let's start off with our first one. It is a human-based story. That's how we usually like to start this show off. So it's about the recent train derailments that happened in East Palestine, Ohio. It was a real environmental disaster for this small town in Ohio, this small Midwestern town. So let's see what we can learn a little bit more about the recent kind of updates to this story that have come out in the past week, and we'll see what we can learn. So the EPA demands Norfolk Southern handle all cleanup after the Ohio toxic train wreck and threatens consequences. So I'm a little bit wary to see what the consequences are going to be, but we know that the town is really concerned. There have been recent stories coming out about nausea and rashes and coughs, sore throats that the residents believe to be connected to this, the pollutants and the cleanup chemicals that were both spilled and then deployed to try and clean up this waste that was dumped into the Ohio River. So let's see, the CNN anchor is interviewing this Ohio lawmaker, and basically they're asking him if he would drink the water in East Palestine at this time, a few days now removed from this spill. So let's see what we can learn.
Before we get to what the fixes are and look a little bit closer.
All right, my first impression is that this man looks as though he has been on a solid diet of toxic chemicals for the past, couple decades at least. But let's see what he has to say about this environmental toxic chemical spill.
This company, I want to ask you.
He literally looks like the Star Wars Emperor Palpatine when he turns into Darth Sidious a little bit.
Saying it's safe, they should drink the water too to show the residents that they would drink it.
Well, I think they are. I mean, I talked to the mayor. The mayor said definitively, emphatically, that people can drink the water. The mayor's, I don't think the mayor has small kids. He looks a little older to me. I didn't ask him, but about bathing.
Again, it sounds like this guy, Senator Sherrod Brown, has been basically just drinking vinyl chloride for the past 10 years.
His kids, but he has said he would drink this water.
Right, but to show the residents who are so skeptical, do you think that they
Well, I think he probably is. Yeah, I think he probably is.
Probably.
I do think,
probably.
as I said,
Probably not.
You hear all this stuff about stock buybacks, and they're underinvesting, as you say, in rail safety, the tracks themselves, and the cars. But when it really hits you, is I was at the home of Christina Ferguson. I spoke at length to the fire chief, Chief Drabel. I then was at the home of Christine Ferguson, who invited us in. She fled her home. And then she came back to meet us there, but she's not living back there. She's skeptical, as she has a right to be, but the pain and anguish in her face, she lives with her mother-in-law lives with her, who is ill.
Okay, I can't listen to this guy talk anymore. I just feel like he has basically been bathing in the Ohio River after the chemical spill. That's kind of why this message is coming across this way. It's really hard to follow. He's kind of like just very gravelly voice. But I think, what he's saying is that the residents have every right to be skeptical right now. Although there's been a really intense cleanup effort so far, obviously these contaminants can be spilling into the water supply. And then even if it's diluted, it can still have a harm not only to the residents, but also to the environment and the species that are affected there. I read somewhere, I think it was like 3,500 fish have already been found dead in the Ohio River. So it's a complete environmental disaster. And one thing that I was seeing about this story was this city hall meeting that these Ohio residents had in East Palestine, and basically this woman was in this gymnasium, and she was speaking to a news reporter and basically saying that it's really the politics of power here. It's this idea that the lives of the residents of this small Midwestern town aren't as valuable at the end of the day to these corporate interests as the toxic chemicals that they're carrying through their town on this railway. And this is nothing new. The history of rail work and rail, transport of goods in this country goes back to the 1800s, and a lot of people were harmed and killed in the creation of these railroads, and now the communities that they're traveling through are not necessarily enjoying the profits of the railroads, but they are being affected by the negative environmental consequences of things like derailments and spills, which are inevitable. when they happen, you wanted to see some accountability. So it's nice to see, at least from this story, that Norfolk Southern, the railway that caused the disaster, or at least that this disaster happened to, is being held to account. And they are going to be asked to, have a more permanent presence in East Palestine. They're going to be asked to really try and deliver some, repair to this railway, and to innovate and to upgrade the systems, the infrastructure, so that these kinds of disasters don't happen as much. But also hopefully can give some aid and relief to the people whose health may be affected. And we really don't know how. Vinyl chloride is a chemical that was used to clean up the spill intentionally, but is also an incredibly toxic chemical in and of itself. It's one of the main ingredients in cigarettes. So it's just very dangerous. Volatile chemical spills are never good for anyone's health. So besides, again, the human cost, this is an environmentally damaging story. And it also speaks to these kind of hierarchies of class and power, and how these often times, faceless corporations can kind of take advantage of and abuse the citizens who have to deal with these negative effects. And that sucks. Hopefully that, we can really see some take this as a sign for a larger need for improving the infrastructure in this country, and hopefully we can get some aid to those citizens in East Palestine as well. So let's move on to our next story. It's a little bit more of a feel-good story. We're moving on to the animal segment of the show. So this was a story that came out this week in my news feed, and I thought it was cool to look at some of these photographs. It was the Underwater Photos of the Year awards. So I wanted to take a look at some of these photos. I just thought they were really cool. I've always been into photography. I can't count myself as a photographer personally. I don't know the ins and outs of the nuances of photography. I have a few photographer friends. Shout out Brittany. But at the same time, I love looking at great photographs, and especially photographs of animals. So let's take a look. And I loved the winner photograph here. And we'll get the name of the photographer. Kat Zhao was the name of the photographer who took this winning picture here, and I'll get it up on the screen for you as well so you can see it. And it's of a dolphin in the Amazon rainforest. Now, I'm pretty sure these are the famous pink dolphins. You can't necessarily tell it's that pink dolphin, but these creatures are just so incredible. They have this big, permanent grin from the way that their kind of bill is shaped here, their snout. And it's just perfectly framed against this sunset. It's in the Amazon River. It's this really kind of mystical setting, and just this incredible, incredible creature coming up and really posing for the camera. I don't know how they were able to either lure this dolphin over. I know dolphins are naturally, pretty curious. They might come over and just investigate what's going on with the camera. But I just loved this photo, and I thought it was so cool. So I can see why it won. Definitely a huge fan of the pink dolphin. So let's see. There's a few more photos that were, honorable mentions, runners up. So let's see some of these other ones. Some of them are really positive and fun, and there's a couple I think that are a little bit more. This one, it looks like he's actually trying to grab the camera, which is really funny. But again, just amazing that you can have, not only these crystal clear photos, a beautiful setting, but just the ability to interact this close up and in this, really fun and positive way with these creatures is really, really special. This one I love because I think that it really helps me maybe understand a little bit more about the manta ray, and kind of the reason why it's designed the way it is. These creatures are so interesting, and you can really see how the way that their body moves is kind of reflected in the way that the water moves, right? It almost looks the same, that kind of wavy pattern, and really skimming along the bottom of the sand. And it also makes me, see they are a little bit more social. I got a chance once to hold stingrays, right? And there was a bunch over there, but it never really clicked, I guess, at the time that they really were, really social creatures. But, this is clearly like a group of manta rays here that are traveling either together or at least nearby, clustered together. So these are southern stingrays, sorry, not manta rays, in the Cayman Islands. So, and this was J. Gregory Sherman. Let's actually get the photographer for the number 2 was Suleiman Alatiki was the photographer on the second one here. All right, let's go on to a couple more of these. Yeah, this one, I couldn't tell if the photo was just the school of fish when I first looked at it, and then you see the huge whale shark. And the whale shark, I think that's a bucket list thing for me. I'd love to kind of ride on a whale shark. You can do that. I think I saw that in a book when I was a kid, just a guy grabbing onto the fin of the whale shark and it'll tow you along. They are pretty harmless to humans. So this one was pretty interesting, right? It's just taking a big gulp of fish. It's going nom, nom, nom on these fish. So, sorry, let's get the photographer here. Ollie Clark photo of a whale shark turning from a shelter for the school of fish into a hunter. Named as the overall runner-up, and yeah, I can see why it's this great dynamic shot of this feeding. This one, I don't know why, but I always make Star Wars references, but this one reminded me of the, I'm going to butcher the name now, but Jar Jar Binks and his underwater lake community, and basically just these gelatin sacs on these fish, I imagine are egg sacs. Yeah, the embryonic plain fin midshipman, oh my god, it's a mouthful, in Vancouver Island, and this was Shane Gross. Shane Gross, and this photo is it's a little bit disturbing, I'm not gonna lie. And this one I thought was so cool. It looked like the lake in Harry Potter. Again, my references are limited, clearly. Sunlight beats down through the marine jungles of Himanthalia algae on the chalk reefs of the Needles Marine Conservation Zone just off the coast of the Isle of Wight in the United Kingdom. In this photo captured by Theo Vickers. And I just love this. You know, it looks like it's something out of like a fairy tale. It's these really cool vines and trees, and it really shows that there's this natural, you know, forest-like ecosystem on a lot of these forests or sea floors and seabeds. You know, and it's really lush, and it can even seem like you are walking in like an Avatar rainforest or something just by going under the water. It's pretty cool. This one, you know, this one is tragic. You know, this one is a brilliant photo for a different reason, in that it raises awareness of, you know, poaching and fishing, you know, overfishing the oceans. This is you know, again, it's a tragic photo of this humpback whale entangled in ropes and a buoy. The devastating image captured by Alvaro Herrero in Baja, California, Mexico. And again, photos like this, you know, no one likes to see a photo like this, but at the same time, it does kind of show the need to really change the way that we think about our relationship to the oceans and, you know, to the planet in general. So I think raising awareness through photographs like this is really important. And, you know, you hate to see this. You know, this is a whale that can be alive for a long time, and it has this, you know, awful entanglement here. Hopefully, you know, I don't know, maybe they were able to help this whale out. I don't know if they were able to even get close to the whale to even try to remove this. I don't know if it would be safe to try and remove this. But, you know, we wish the best for the whales. Save the whales, guys. Really, the team save the whales. And then finally, this one kind of looks like it's from Finding Nemo, but it's the small butterfish taking refuge in a sea urchin shell in this photo taken by Malcolm Nimmo in Loch Dulch in Scotland. And it's just perfect, this little window cut out of this shell, and you can see the fear in the eyes of this poor fish as he's just trying to hide from the rest of the bigger fish out there. So these are just some of the breathtaking photos of the year from underwater photo category in 2023. That's just me getting up my news. So let's go back now and let's transition into the next part of the show here, which is a story that is kind of our Just When You Thought segment. So we call it that because it's just, you know, it's, you know, things that you already thought were maybe heading in a certain direction, but, you know, maybe it's not so simple. So just when you thought Elon Musk was on his way to becoming the most powerful man on Earth, his machines are letting him down, not Elon Musk. You know, before we get into it, I mean, I think that Elon Musk is very much like, and this might be a controversial take, but very much like Kanye West in that he would be so much better if he only focused on one thing. That's the only way that I really see them as being similar at all. And I'm not going to get into any Kanye stuff right now, but the point being is that, like, you know, Kanye would probably fare a lot better if he just stuck to making music. And I think the same about Elon Musk. You know, he has his eggs in a lot of baskets, from he was trying to dig tunnels under LA to you know, SpaceX and sending rockets to Mars, or trying to do these missions to Mars, which are incredible. You know, he's sending Starlink internet satellites. We did a story about that on our earlier episodes. And so he's just doing a lot of different things, right? Neuralink, all these different projects, right? And his baby is really Tesla, you know, is these electric cars. That's, you know, supposedly his bread and butter. And recently, he's been trying to roll out this beta of his full autopilot software, right? Which is the whole point. Besides the electric vehicles, the whole point of the Tesla model is that it's supposedly going to drive itself, right? And we'll get into the kind of story behind the story here and what this maybe means for American society or society as a whole, and limiting your freedoms and things like that, where autonomy takes us ultimately. But For now, just understand we're just at the beginning of this, and so there's going to be a lot of trial and error, and hopefully not a lot of people getting hurt from these rollouts, right? The rollouts of things like full autopilot for cars, right? It's not something that's just going to happen overnight, but it will, I think, happen. So let's see how it's going so far. And this story has come out that there's a huge recall. 350,000 plus cars, I think, are being recalled, but it's not a physical recall. It's a little different. They only have to send out this software remotely to each Tesla. They don't necessarily have to go into a Tesla dealership and to, have them actually physically handle their car. So let's see a little bit of this story and let's see what we can learn. All right. Tesla recalling nearly 363,000 vehicles equipped with full self-driving. So let's see.
Oh, we've got a situation in front of us. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Oh, no, we're going on the wrong side of the road. Whoa, 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 whoa. No.
This doesn't sound great so far. I think suffice to say, if you're having that many, whoa. It's clearly got a long way to go. But let's see. Hopefully this thing doesn't try to, kill this man.
This is a Tesla Model 3. So we are turning on the full self-driving beta.
Oh, whoa.
Okay.
This all seems so simple.
Officially, technically, sort of driving itself.
Whoa. So again, the reason he's saying sort of technically is because although it is driving itself, you do need to have a licensed driver ready to take over at any time in case it does make any errors. So it's full self-driving with an asterisk.
Whoa. That was a really sharp turn the car just tried to make. Oh, we've got a situation in front of us. Whoa. Okay. What we just had in front of us was a UPS truck coming onto our lane. We had a guy in front of us with a cargo bike. To avoid hitting the guy on the bike, the car seemed to want to put us straight into a giant UPS truck. I would prefer not to hit a UPS truck today, so I took over.
All right, so let's pause this video here. So he just is trying to drive down the road, right? And this biker with some cargo attached pulls out from the sidewalk in front of his Tesla. And so in response to trying to avoid that pedestrian, right, the car swerves the car out of the way, but ignores the fact really, or at least is prioritizing the biker to the driver of the car to the point where it's going to swerve him into oncoming traffic, this giant UPS truck that's coming right at him, in order to not hit the biker, right? And this gets into all these, crazy moral calculations, right? And what are the question, what are the real limitations, if any, of AI in terms of making these kinds of in-the-moment, real-life decisions, right? And he goes on in the video to mention this idea, the role of experience, right? That this is something that the system, the algorithm, whatever, is going to have to learn over time, right? How to make these kinds of calculations. But in the meantime, right, that's the real kind of meat of this issue is like, in the meantime, how willing are we to roll out these kinds of technologies? How many people are going to get hurt in the process? Only today I saw this story on TMZ of this guy who, again, tragically ran his car, his Tesla was using that beta and ran into a fire truck, and the man was killed because this autopilot is favoring avoiding accidents or pedestrians in prioritizing their lives over the lives of the car driver, right? And again, no one should, it's awful if anyone's ever put in a situation where they have to make that kind of split-second decision, but to just totally give it over to a machine to make those decisions, I don't know, it's a hard moral, conflict to get on board with, or to side with the AI over just allowing humans to make these decisions and to deal with the outcomes, right? And to try to be more responsible drivers, right? And so let's talk a little bit about the story behind the story here. Again, the story behind the story here is this idea of automation, is the idea that automation is coming for your jobs, it's coming for your car. That's the next phase of this rollout, is essentially that automated self-driving cars are going to be preferred because, statistically, they're going to ultimately, I think, become safer than, or at least present lower numbers, however they decide to crunch the data. Once there's enough of these self-driving cars on the road that people just buy over the next, let's say, 10 years, they're going to start creating laws that say, no non-self-driving cars will be able to be created after a certain time. And if they are, I think they're going to restrict them to these racetracks or rental tracks where you can pay money to go and have the experience of driving a car manually. But everyday public transportation and your commute transportation, your own car, is going to be automated. And people are going to walk right into that. People are going to, well, choose safety and convenience over, liberty and, autonomy almost every day. So people will pick automation over autonomy almost any day of the week. And that is scary to me. I think that, this speaks to these kind of World Economic Forum ideas of like in the future, you'll own nothing and be happy about it. And I don't know if I can get on board with that. I think that people really do need a sense of freedom and autonomy to really be their fullest versions of themselves and to really feel happy, to really feel free and peaceful, and content and fulfilled in life. I think handing over all of these, freedoms and rights to these machines and AIs, we already are seeing more and more of these stories just in the first couple episodes here on the show. I only see this becoming more invasive in our lives. And I think that there's not necessarily that we should fight against it, but we should take these early rollouts, this period of years that we're in right now, to really do make these moral calculations. We mentioned this a little bit, or this will kind of be a theme, I think, of this episode, but we ask a lot of the times, we don't ask, should we? We only ask, can we do something? We don't necessarily ever ask, should we, right? And this is a moral calculation that needs to be done with all of these technologies that are developing. I think that you need to have this kind of moral conversation, right? I'm not saying it needs to be coming from someone like an Elon Musk, right? It shouldn't be dictated from on high from any one person, but it should be a conversation, and it should be something we consider before we just blindly adopt a lot of these AI technologies and accept them and embrace them. We should question what value they really bring to our lives and what is the downside, if any. What is the consequence, right? We don't want people getting hurt, but we also don't want to stagnate. We want to grow. We want to innovate, but we want to do it safely, and we want to do it in a way that's really in a human interest, right? That's going to lead to more actual fulfillment in people's lives. So I'm not sure that automated cars and full self-driving is the way to do that. I love the idea of electric cars. I think we need to figure out the battery situation and how we're going to do that sustainably. But at the end of the day, I think going electric is obviously the way to go, until we can figure out an even cleaner energy source. But let's move on a little bit from this story. We've spent a good amount of time on this Tesla recall. So let's go on to our next story here. And this story is our space segment. So I'm really excited to talk a little bit. This is kind of our main story for the week. And this one is all about the idea of space mining. So let's get into this idea. We're going to see a couple movie clips later on, and we'll get into this idea of space mining. So obviously the mining industry in America goes back hundreds of years. The idea of black gold, and these rushes for big profits, right, in the interior and western parts of the country. Whole cities were basically created based on the profits that were gained from oil. And the idea of going and being the first to dominate a natural resource and take control of it to make the most profit from it is a tale as old as time in terms of humanity and trying to basically, it tells the whole story of our relationship to the natural world, basically, right? It's a tale of conquering and exploitation, and harming the people. We saw that with East Ohio and Palestine, right? That idea that these corporate interests will value the product and the resource more than the lives of the inhabitants or the lives of the resident animal flora and fauna, the plants and animals. Always an afterthought when it comes to seizing property and seizing territory, seizing resources. So this is, I think, the next iteration of that, which will be mining natural resources in outer space and near Earth objects like planets, moons, asteroids. So let's see a little bit of what this story has to offer us, and let's see what we can learn. The hype is out of this world, but mining in space won't save the Earth. We know the world must move to cleaner energy sources to head off the worst effects of climate change, but the technology required for the transition is very mineral intensive. So where will all these resources come from? Good question, article. Many in the space industry are pointing beyond Earth. Asteroids and the moon are thought to contain abundant platinum group elements needed in that transition, as well as other valuable resources. This has prompted a push towards commercial mining in outer space, right? So we'll see a little bit later on these kind of government pushes to kind of respark and restart these old Apollo and Artemis missions to the moon, bringing humans back to the moon. And I think that this has to do a lot with that kind of what we call the story behind the story, right? What is the real motivation behind re-sparking that? Is it just to inspire and to really, innovate and inspire people to innovate in this country here on Earth? We'll see some about that. But also a part of the story is going to be these commercial corporate interests, right? Who's funding the operation, right? Funding cuts were the original reason that these moon programs were lost. And so if we need a lot of sustainable finance to make these operations happen, where is that going to come from, right? And I think a lot of it will be from this commercial mining. California-based company Astroforge is the latest company to make strides into the space mining rush. The company last week announced plans to launch 2 missions this year, one to refine platinum and a sample of asteroid-like material, and another to find an asteroid near Earth to mine. Proponents of mining in space often point to the potential benefits for Earth and its people. Likely, they're talking about, things like automated car batteries and better phone batteries and all these technologies that they can give to billions of people and make huge profits on. But can theoretically improve the conditions of life for a lot of people. But how certain are these benefits? Our research casts doubts on many of them. Research, often the bane of false promises and claims. So let's see what this research shows. A very risky bet. Space mining supporters often claim a bounty of space resources exist. Got to get that booty. And exploiting them would generate trillions of dollars in mining revenue. So this is humongous profits that we're talking about here, right? This is not, just another Silicon Valley startup that might, bottom out and might go bankrupt or it might generate $1 billion or more dollars. This is $1 trillion operation, right? This is trillions and trillions of dollars that can fund whole, world economies potentially. But let's see how it goes. But information on resources in space is scarce, highly varied, and uncertain. Such statements rely strongly on remote sensing technology and modeling, techniques that use interpretations, estimates, assumptions, and probabilities. Not great data, in terms of, making real informed decisions. Whether mineral deposits lying beyond Earth are commercially viable has not yet been proven. Work on this is underway. So they're already developing these projects, right? This is really where they're headed. And we'll see this more when we get to the lunar base section of the show. The OSIRIS-REx space mission, for example, gathered a small sample from near-Earth asteroid Bennu and is bringing it back to Earth this year so it can be studied. This year's Astroforge missions also aim to firm up the industry's viability, but so far, investing in the extraction of space resource is even more speculative than mining on Earth. So let's see what the potential drawbacks are. What are the downsides? Is anyone saying what the downsides of this will be? Well, they're asking where the waste will go, right? Where are you going to put all the byproducts of this space mining? Because terrestrial mining on Earth, often requires robust equipment to extract, handle, and process large volumes of rock. Most of the rock is disposed of as waste once the material of interest, such as copper, is obtained. And again, this is, our whole relationship to the natural world. You see all these awful pictures coming out of rhinoceroses poached for their horns, right? And the rest of the animal is left untouched, right? And this really goes against nature. If you go back to indigenous communities in America, right, and other parts of the world, they would use the whole animal and honor all the parts of it, right, and not let nothing go to waste, right? If we had to take anything, we would give it back, or we would at least respect it enough to use the whole life that we took, right? If it's something like a rhinoceros or a buffalo or whatever, right? The idea that you're only going to take what's valuable to you and let the rest go to waste, right? That's the imbalance that really tells the whole story behind the story here, right? Is that mining and space mining ultimately will be the same thing, is that we're only going to take what we need and the rest will just become waste when it could potentially either be used or should just be left alone, right? We should find other ways to do it. But the money is big, and so there's going to be people coming for it, right? And that's the story here. Waste disposal will be even more challenging in space. The full environmental and safety implications are not yet quite clear, but we know space debris already falls to Earth quite frequently. And if you look, there is a huge amount of space junk already. So if they're going to start a new industry that's going to generate all this new space debris, the ramifications here could be incredibly severe, right? You could see just regular space junk showers, right? Your weatherman comes on and he's like, watch out, we got some drills coming back from the atmosphere. They're going to be dropping on East Palestine into the Ohio River. So, it's just going to affect communities worldwide now. And this, this space debris and space junk will now be raining on Earth. Fun. For example, space debris in the snowy mountains in New South Wales last year was confirmed as belonging to a craft owned by Elon Musk's SpaceX company, spreading those eggs around. And in the U.S. state of Oklahoma in '97, a woman out exercising and this is not really that funny, but was reportedly hit in the shoulder by a piece of falling space junk. Right? Mining on Earth often damages the natural environment, right? Impacting land, waterways, air quality, and ecosystems. In places where mining is tightly regulated, environmental and human safety concerns must be addressed. But there are also countless examples around the world where mining regulation is lax, right? And that's to say the least, right? There are people working in awful, subhuman conditions in places like Africa for these conflict minerals like cobalt and lithium and things like that. So it's just a very hard to regulate and poorly regulated industry on Earth. So my, assumption would be how much more regulated and, I guess environmentally sustainable, environmentally just, you might say, will this new mining operation be? Space is not a supermarket. In 2017, U.S. space entrepreneur Jeff Bezos stated, "Every kind of element that you need is available in space in very large quantities." And so over the next couple of 100 years, and that's how far along these guys are thinking, these current billionaires are thinking, is how to develop humanity over the next couple centuries. That will allow us to both continue to have a dynamic, expanding, growing, thriving, interesting civilization, interesting depending on who you ask, and interesting in that we're going to develop onto these other space bodies, right? That's what makes it interesting and generating huge profit while still protecting this planet. And think about where that is in that sentence, right? That is the afterthought, right? The idea of being interesting is more important than being sustainable in the eyes of these profiteers. So let's move on a little bit here. This is a related story here, and this is all about NASA's new push to actually, shout out NASA, 4 things that we've learned about NASA's planned base camp on the moon. And so the story here, right? NASA's last manned mission to the moon was in 1972 with Apollo 17. And they left Earth or they left the moon, and the last man to leave the moon basically turned around and said, the next time we come to the moon, we'll be here to stay, right? And that's really the push here, is that they're interested in creating a more permanent residence for humanity on the moon. And we'll see a little bit. There's what I think going to be basically what's going to look like the mall, essentially in 50 years. There's going to be a moon base that is fully developed out and even commercialized, right, for space tourism. People that work in space is going to be a more regular thing that you're going to see in the next 50 years, I think. And so they're trying to start creating the infrastructure for that transition. So let's see a little bit about what they had planned for this lunar base, and we'll see what we can learn. Eventually, the station will allow astronauts to spend up to 2 months on the lunar surface. Perfect for your little family vacation. Go and spend a couple weeks on the moon. It's going to be great. I would love to do that. That sounds awesome. An artist's rendering of astronauts working near NASA's Artemis base camp, complete with a rover and an RV. I mean, it looks like Disney World here. I mean, this is just short of Disney World here. No, obviously I'm kidding, but it's a different kind of experience. It's a once in a lifetime kind of thing. Go and study or live or vacation on the moon. It seems incredible, right? It's a once in a lifetime experience. And right now, obviously, the early development is just for the astronauts. It's just for this research. It's kind of the scouts going into the new world and trying to see, is this viable for us? Are we going to be able to do this, right? And this is the next frontier, the final frontier here of space that we're trying to now make a more permanent residence in. Humans haven't set foot on the moon in more than half a century, but NASA's Artemis program is going to send them back with a series of missions beginning in early September. When the first astronaut plants her boots in the lunar soil in 2025 as part of Artemis 3, assuming the current schedule holds, it will be the start of an even more ambitious project than sending humans back to the moon. NASA plans to construct a base camp somewhere among the gray dust and craggy rocks of the moon's south pole. The lunar outpost will allow the Artemis missions to eventually shatter Apollo 17's record for the longest stay on the moon, which was 74 hours, 59 minutes, 38 seconds. Couldn't it just hang on that last, the last few seconds there, made it an even 75 hours, guys? Oh, beggars can't be choosers here. I wasn't there. While serving as a jumping off point for in-depth exploration. NASA says the camp is going to start small, only facilitating missions for a week or two, but as the camp grows in size and sophistication, the agency hopes to sustain crews for up to 2 months at a time. Current plans call for a lunar cabin, hope it's cozy, maybe you get a little fire going, I don't know. An open-top rover, similar to the kind used in the Apollo missions, and something akin to an RV that would provide mobility while allowing astronauts to live and work away from the base for days or weeks at a time. Again, they're just trying to create a more permanent residence for humans on the moon, and this is just the beginning phase of this more, like they said, ambitious project. And again, this is another example of we ask, can we? This goes back to that Kennedy speech, right? We chose to go to the moon not because it is easy, but because it is hard. And I do resonate with that. I believe that that's true. I believe we should be ambitious in our dreams. We should dream big. We should try to imagine what is possible. But I also think we should temper that with an additional question: is what is most choice-worthy, right? This goes back, way back in philosophy, right? Aristotle and all this stuff, right? What is the most choice-worthy thing to do, right? Is it worth our while to go and, basically colonize the moon and to try and create a more permanent residence that can support these ultimate economies? Because again, I mentioned that I think the moon's going to turn into the mall, right? And you see that in our imagination, right? In movies and television, and that brings me into this clip from a great sci-fi movie from the past few years, which was Ad Astra with Brad Pitt. And this is just a quick clip from the movie that had to do with the moon base that they had depicted, and I think it is basically exactly what this is going to be in the next 50 years, right? They're going to start with this little moon cabin with the rover and the research lab, and then eventually it will become like Patriot Place. But let's see a little bit from this clip here, and you'll see what I mean. And so you can see the Applebee's in the corner here, and that basically tells you everything to know, right? It's this huge facility, right? It's all developed. You can see all the little brands, and I think they even will show the inside part of it too. But you see the Applebee's tells you everything you need to know. And it's got the subway inside, it's got the bathrooms. It looks like like a tea station, or like a hotel lobby maybe, or just a shopping center, right? Something like that. And it's fully developed, right? It's just normalized. People are going and coming and going. It's been completely commercialized, right? There are restaurants and shops there supporting this industry, right? And again, another part of that movie is about space pirates too. So you're going to see people that are having a residence on the moon that are not on that mission, but they're trying to maybe sabotage or steal some of these minerals. There's a whole, new generation of conflicts coming when we start trying to expand our exploitative relationships that we have currently on Earth to these near Earth bodies, right? And that's, terrifying, but it seems somewhat inevitable, right? Just like the Tesla rollout of these self-driving cars seems somewhat inevitable based on the momentum we're currently on, it seems unlikely that we're going to stop in its tracks the development of these huge, industries that could generate, like they said, trillions and trillions of dollars. Seems like the only motivation when we think about these things. And maybe that's another kind of big theme of today's episode, is this idea that we really need to reframe the way that we think about our relationship to the natural world and to the planet as a whole, right? We are not the end-all, be-all, only species of worthiness on this planet, right? And, we should respect it more. We should respect the planet's natural plants and animals that we rely on so heavily, right? And we should consider how we treat it. Is profit the only motive here, or is, sustaining the game a more choice-worthy outcome, right? So I guess we'll leave it there for today. We'll let you sit on that for the next week. We'll think a little bit more about what our relationship is to the planet. We thank you so much for tuning into the show. I hope you enjoyed this week's stories. If you have any ideas for stories or things that you want me to cover, be sure to comment below. Hit that like and subscribe button, and we'll see you next week. Until then, I'm Zach, and this has been Zach on Earth. Peace out.